So I've been working on these Route 66 videos for quite some time now. My trip was April 2016, recording this in the later part of 2016. It has taken a while. I thought it might be interesting to go through, my process and talk a little bit about how I put these together. Now, I'm not saying this is any kind of tutorial. It's just a collection of my thoughts going through and making these videos, because I'm no expert when it comes to video production. I've got a lot to learn, and a lot of the video production has actually been me learning new techniques, one of which is what you're seeing right now, which is the map creation that I've got on the screen. And this basically involved a process of grabbing some tiles from Google Maps one by one and then stitching them together. And these are the maps that you see when there's time-lapse footage in the car, and I've put these maps along the bottom to give you an idea of where I'm driving. You might have noticed as well that the driving doesn't actually match up at all with what you're seeing on the map. Just it's more indicative because of the way the time-lapse is recorded. I had 2 batteries with me for the GoPro, which was doing the time-lapse footage, but I only had time when the battery, there's no indication when the battery runs out, so I recorded until one battery was dead, basically, and it wouldn't have made sense unless I was able to instantly stop, replace the battery and carry on, and it's just not possible when you're driving a route like that. You probably notice After Effects is my weapon of choice here. This is Creative Cloud edition of After Effects. There's probably better ways of editing video, but for things like overlays and advanced things like you're seeing here, After Effects is for me the way to go. Imagine it, never used After Effects, it's just Photoshop with a timeline. It's a very simple way of putting it. It's a lot more complicated to work with than that. And you can see each of the individual layers that I'm working with here. The compositions are mile counters, and I had to sync those up and do a few calculations to work out how many miles are on each section. I'm just putting together the actual journey now from Peach Springs, I think, to the start of the Oatman section of the map. But I do have time lapse for this, but the way I'm working, I've got a huge composition, and the main reason for that is just so I can draw the line in piece. So I don't want to have to scroll the composition, the camera on the composition, and then move it around while I'm drawing the line. It's much easier just to draw the line in one big go. We've done the line now. We're just putting it together with the footage and making sure all the layers on the compositions here have the same duration. And I'm just syncing that up, make sure that they all work together. The video sections varied. Turns out it varied in quality. I tried to take as much video in the car as possible because I didn't have a professional setup or anything on my trip. I just had a handheld camera, and that means that a lot of wind noise gets into the camera, and I'm keen to not have that on the video if possible. The car was a natural place to avoid the wind, so that's why a lot of the footage you see is me in the car. I'm giving credit to everybody as well whose music I've used, and that was a bit of a big hassle. As you know, YouTube's very big on blocking copyrighted music from appearing on its service, which is, understandable. I suppose they've come under a lot of pressure to cut down on copyrighted content, and I've basically just got the soundtrack from the great site Free Music Archive, which has all of its stuff Creative Commons, so you're able to use it to some degree. Most of its attribution, which means that you need to attribute the music to the author and link to it, which I have done on screen and in the video description. And I'm previewing a few videos here to put into the Oatman section. Seeing as it was, the one thing I learned from making all these was that it took a very long time to make one video. We're talking about up to 12 hours to make a single video of about 20 minutes, and that meant that, yeah, I'm just not able to do it, barely able to do it in a weekend, what with everything else going on. And that means that, you know, there's been a few gaps, and as a result of that, it's now a lot later in the year as I'm recording this, and I can't really remember the order in which I visited things, what I did, what I said, so I'm having to watch through everything and just get a general idea of how I want the video to flow, if that makes sense. This is perhaps one of my favourite parts of the trip, which is why I've chosen this as subject for the making of video, because it's just full of surprises on the road, and a lot of Route 66 is just full of crazy surprises that, you know, one-off attractions that you'd never see anywhere else. But as you get out into Arizona, bearing in mind Britain really has no terrain like that at all. You know, when I was in Illinois and Missouri, yeah, the terrain was different, but it was still grass and trees and things like that. But here, the trees are totally different. There's a lot fewer of them. The terrain is, it's a lot of red rocks. It was fascinating to see that. And I think that's why I enjoyed this section so much, because there's just nothing comparable in Britain. I can't really see anything like that around. So I'm making a section here as well, which has some photos in it, and I'm interspersing that with some video, some transitions. I'm using the basic toolkit of transition effects in After Effects wherever possible. Just because the videos take so long, I don't really have a lot of time to customize the transitions. Block dissolve. Look, you know, it looks okay. It's only on the screen for less than half a second, so anyone using After Effects probably, and watching these videos, probably thinks, oh, you know, I recognize that. He's just ripped that transition off from that set list. But that, you know, that's fine. I don't mind too much. And obviously the Ken Burns effect is quite important to me, which is, in case you don't know, the Ken Burns is named after a documentary filmmaker called Ken Burns, who introduced this effect. A lot of his documentaries, like the West and the Civil War, things like that, these were, the subjects of these documentaries were things where there was no video, so video cameras didn't exist in the time of the American Civil War, and the time of the sort of Wild West where that documentary was featured. So all he had to work with on screen, for the most part, except for the interviews he did, were a whole bunch of stills photographs. So he's got around that by kind of bringing the photographs to life somewhat, giving them a slight zoom or a pan, and I try and vary that as well. I'm reusing that very simple effect. It's very low on demand for processing. You're not manipulating the image, you're not doing real-time processing on it, so the rendering time's great. And I'm just kind of putting this together with some photographs, sweeping across some of the footage, and making sure that it all plays back. Music as well. I wanted the music to fade slightly. I wanted you to be able to hear as much of the music as possible in the sometimes long sections where I'm not on camera, thankfully, talking a whole lot. And I need to keep the music running in certain parts just for continuity. Some videos I felt like didn't need background music, and others I felt like either I'd used too little of the track to just cut it short before I start speaking again, or I just wanted that background noise in there to add a little bit of variety. Like I said, I'm not a filmmaker, I'm not a professional video editor. I don't really know what the status quo is with things like that. But I'm putting together all these photographs one by one, and then making sure that they all have something interesting going on in them, whether it's a zoom, or whether it's perhaps a pan, or a combination of both in some situations. Just whatever the photographs really can be used for. And again, it's not a professional camera. It's a basic compact camera. Not a very cheap one. It's not one of the, you can get inexpensive digital cameras for basically next to no money these days. But this one was, 1080 video recording, and actually pretty good zoom, 30 times digital zoom, not a digital, optical zoom. They have a very powerful zoom on it, but at 30 times it was pretty much unusable because the focus and the stability weren't there. I tried to cut those bits out in any video I've recorded where I've used extensive zoom. Just putting together the start of the open section here, and you can tell from this that this is not a time lapse of the entire production of this video. We've started quite a long way in there, and that just indicates that, you know, even though this is cut down in time, you can see it's sped up quite a bit. It doesn't represent the whole video production process by any means. The lines on the map were mostly drawn by this stage. I try and start with those because that's an extremely tedious thing to do. If you are thinking of doing that, if you're thinking of animating a map with a line moving across it and the camera following the line, I would strongly suggest try it once, see how you like it, and then think if you could be bothered to repeat that for a series of videos, if that's what you're doing, because I'd highly recommend that. That was the biggest time sink. I highly recommend thinking twice about doing that. Subtitling here because one of the downsides is I wanted to do some sections outside and I thought I could get away with it. It's difficult to tell how much wind noise you're getting on the camera. When you play back video on the camera, the sound's really not up to much, so I couldn't really tell straight afterwards whether the sound was going to be a problem. And a lot of these places I just wanted to get my piece done and then get moving, because there's so much to see in a day on the road that, you know, I don't want to be spending an hour in one place filming. I thought it'd be nice to put a few shots of the car and the cabins here at the Cool Springs, the start of the route, and again, very simple Ken Burns style effect going on while I'm doing that. I realised that the workspace I'm using is probably not ideal. I've seen various screenshots and videos of other people working with After Effects, and generally they've using very high resolution, maybe 2 monitors, and spreading things out a lot more. I guess there's something I could possibly improve on in the future, but this is all I know, so I'm working with just a single monitor setup, which does make it easier to do the time lapse, but that's perhaps the only benefit to doing something like that. I tried not to put in, I had a lot of photos. I'd say probably about half of them got used. I didn't feel the need to put in just every photograph. They have to be interesting to be included. I feel like I was quite concise with my photography. I didn't take too many photos that I thought afterwards, they're going to be terrible, but it does depend on the length of the section as well. Like, a few people have commented, the talking sections are too long, or the map sections are too long. It'd be easier to watch shorter videos. I'm striking a balance really between people who want to see longer form stuff. I when I'm on YouTube, I tend to watch longer things. I'm just previewing this whole section now to make sure that it's worked out the way I need it. I like to watch longer videos. That's just a personal preference. I know there's other people who do too. Some people only watch 5-minute videos. Maybe they've got a quick break or something and they look at something on YouTube. Fair enough. I wasn't going to be able to get all the content I wanted into any video of that sort of length. So we've gone with a sort of compromise, I suppose. Each episode is maybe 20 minutes. There's some exceptions, some shorter and some longer than that. There was a section that I recorded with the car. I wanted to capture the engine from the car, and capture the gauges to show, it's a drive a powerful car across the mountains kind of thing. So I decided that the engine noises weren't really great here. I wanted to strip out the background noise, and I wanted to ensure that the sort of the bass from the engine came through a bit better. As the camera, obviously the microphone in the camera is not ideal. It's not bad, but it's not great. So that's what I'm doing here, is stripping out the background noise and then giving it a bass boost. So I split the audio out from the video file, and I'm just going to run the audio alongside the silent video in After Effects to combine the two back together. once I'm done with this section. There isn't a lot of audio editing that is required, really, other than volume changes. The music I was using was already reasonably well put together. Don't need to change that too much, and I don't need a great deal of audio effects. Audacity was the program. Audacity, if I can say it right, was the program I used, just because it's very simple and it's free, and you don't need a lot more to make audio changes. It's one of the very few times in the series that I've actually taken the audio out of a video and then put together a separate track there. So I'm just running that alongside the video now, just to make sure that those things work together properly. Tried to go for a bit of a creative approach here, haven't really done much with the interior of the car. Most of the time you'll see the camera turned around facing me inside the car, and you'll see the rear of the car in there. But here I've tried to just capture the dashboard a little bit. I did this in the Mustang just to give people an idea of what the dashboard and the controls were like in the Mustang. Got to say, the American cars really not great interiors, considering these are like proper alleged sports cars. And I know like the Camaro and the Mustang that I got were the bottom of the range of those two models, and not the GT or the SS editions. So I mean, they would have been ridiculously expensive to rent. So they are quite limited. But it wasn't awful, the interior, but I was expecting a little bit more from American Motors, not having rented or driven any of those anymore, and never driven any in the past. I just thought they'd be higher quality, but unfortunately not. But like I said, not awful. And there, I'm putting together one of these sections of video where the zoom feature was extreme zooms. It's without a tripod, which I didn't have. I didn't think it'd be necessary. I kind of regretted it when I got there, not getting a tripod for this. They're not expensive. Could have easily carried a tripod with me. Getting a very, very long zoom on the camera with video is incredibly difficult, because when you're keeping it still on no zoom, it's all right. When you're keeping it still on an extreme zoom setting, you've any tiny movement is amplified, 30 times. This is the section of video that I put in here was a truncated section. If you've watched the Oatman video, you'll know that there's only a couple of minutes of me driving in real time there, and the reason for that is that I wanted to put all of the driving section in its own video. For people who are interested in the driving, they can watch that, and for most people who are not interested in it, then we will just have a few minutes. We don't need a whole sort of 10-minute subsection of driving, but I am going to link. YouTube allows you to put in kind of annotations that are linked to other videos, and I found the easiest way is just to control the style of these by having my own box. I can make them look a bit more professional, and I think the YouTube ones look a bit crappy if you get YouTube to just link to a video for you. So I've got my own little section, little box you can click on, and all I'm going to do is draw an outline around that in YouTube, and allow people to click on it. So hopefully that gets the message across, and people who have come to the video of just the Oatman section and want to see the whole driving bit, and they can find their way there. Generally, the annotations I found quite useful. About a quarter of the people looking at the videos will click on an annotation, and they're only available if you're watching on certain devices. Like if you've got a set-top box that plays YouTube or something, the annotation's not going to work. I don't think they work on mobile as well. Could be wrong about that. Don't quote me on that. But as you can see, like we've put together the map, but we're really still, after all this time, we're still working on this one section of the video, which is the start of the drive, and then I'm making sure all the pieces come together now. I might just be guilty when it comes to producing videos of making too many previews. I don't know if that's me doing the necessary work, or whether I'm just a bit paranoid about my own ability with the software and just constantly previewing it to make sure that it's actually going the way that I want. But in any case, you will see a lot of previews here. And I'm just matching everything up now because I actually wanted the track that I was using here, Long John's Jump, great track by Daddy Longlegs, by the way. I wanted it to last until the end of the Oatman Drive, and with sort of several sections of video that I'm working with, I can just cut some of these sections short. The video was too long for the track, so I'm getting the start in the right position and then making sure that the audio matches up. I don't like doing that a great deal because there is a chance that someone they'll object. I've had that a number of times in the past where companies they're automated, but companies scour YouTube looking for allegedly songs that they own or own the rights to, and then take your video down. Now, in the past, I have, because these are free tracks, these are freely available to use under Creative Commons, and I've pointed this out when people have made copyright claims against me. They're not people, it's big evil record companies have made copyright claims against me. I have appealed them with links to the Free Music Archive showing, yes, this is a free track, I don't know why you're claiming it. I've done alright so far, but it is a pain in the ass doing that. And the reason I don't like tying things in strictly with music too much is because if that appeal fails for whatever reason, it could be the end of the video. I just need to take it down and then re-up another version of the same video with a different audio track in it. Now, there wasn't actually that much in Oatman. I was kind of, there's a lot in Oatman, it's just there wasn't a lot of footage that I got. Simple Ken Burns for these 6 photos that I've got going here. I was disappointed, really. Disappointed not to capture more in Oatman. My reaction to it wasn't lengthy, and I didn't really take enough photos there. The Oatman Hotel was just fantastic, great place. Clark Gable apparently spent some time there. In case you don't know who he is, have a look on Wikipedia. Some of the older generation will probably remember him. And just saving my 7th photo, the tacos, to just overlay on top of me talking about stuff. I think it's interesting. It's more interesting if the sort of fairly lengthy sections of me just talking are overlaid with some kind of imagery. I've tried to do that in a number of places, whether that's a small image in the corner or whether that's an image that takes up the whole screen like I have here. And again, trying to keep the transitions a little bit interesting while I'm working, so having things come down from the top or come up from the bottom, animate those transitions. The computer I'm using is not great at doing the old RAM previews, so the way After Effects works is it kind of tries to give you a preview, and I'm using a quarter resolution setting for most of it, so you can still kind of see what's going on in the picture, but it's only a quarter of the final 1080p quality. And depending on the complexity of the footage as well, I'm skipping some of the frames, so I'll skip 2 frames normally, so we're only getting effectively quarter resolution and 10 frames a second. My default playback rate is 30. The camera doesn't capture 60, so there's very little point doing most of it 60 frames a second. Back to the map then, and this is leaving Oatman, and this is basically putting together the section of the trip down to Lake Havasu City with a crazy London Bridge part. I am totally spoiling the Oatman video if you haven't watched that, so I'm hoping you've watched that already. Otherwise you're getting not only what's in the video, but you're hearing about it from me as well. Again, it's just a case of drawing this line. The line drawing in After Effects is pretty good. The pathing works pretty well, but what I've found, I don't know if there's any way around this, but if you stop drawing a line, it's incredibly hard to add points to the end of the line. So that's why I needed to... I've done it a few times and I just can't remember how to do it each time. There's some kind of trick to it, and I've read loads of guides on it, and no one seems to come up with a single definitive way that worked for me. So what did work was just drawing a line in one big chunk, you know. And we got a very large composition encompassing the entire image. Drawn the line, I shrink the composition back down to the size that I want, and I'm using a 3D layer with a camera, and the shape is basically just overlaid on top of the 3D layer, which isn't, you know, the 3D is really not needed. The camera's tracking a null object here, so as the line draws, I'm using trim paths to an animated trim path so that the end of the line is 0 at the start of the composition, and then I just kind of gradually increasing that throughout. For these sections, it's a straight increase, a linear increase from 0 to 100 by the end of the map section, and then just going back to the null object and animating that to basically follow the line as it goes along. I've got a whole load of figures here, and the reason I needed to take so many figures, do a bit of maths here, is because it's not a simple case of counting down. I've got a number on the map for distance to Santa Monica, which is the end, and in certain places of the trip that does go up, and the reason that goes up is because I'm actually driving away from Route 66. When we cross over the interstate, coming from Oatman, going to Lake Havasu City, it's going up. We're actually moving away from Santa Monica here, and as a result I just need to work out how much it needs to increase by, because the other number on the map, which is the distance to Parker, that just straight up decreases the whole way, because obviously we're going immediately to Parker all the way through the video, which will eventually end up at 0 when we get to the end of the video, but the Santa Monica number goes down for a bit and then goes up, and I need to just get those numbers right, tally up the position in the composition where the numbers change, add the necessary keyframes. It's a surprisingly involved process. I didn't expect to have to think about it quite as hard as I did when I was putting that section together, but it gives you an idea of just, you know, how many little things have to come together to make something like this work. It's a very difficult render as well. Once I add the map to the footage, just making sure that it all lines up neatly, and it's difficult, very demanding to get that to work. So the previews of these map sections are not going to be, I've still got it on full. I change it to a quarter eventually once I realise my mistake, because that's never going to work. And once we arrive at Lake Havasu, I just wanted to work out how, and in actual fact, just a small side note here, you can see where I stopped. I stopped in Lake Havasu City because the GPS in the car that I was supplied with was just terrible. Didn't work. It was awful at getting. It could get you in the rough area, but then down to street level, it was just really bad. And obviously the mobile data I've since moaned about in the videos didn't work, so I couldn't use GPS or routing on my phone maps. So you'll notice sometimes if you watch carefully and the time-lapse footage, you can see I do make a mistake. I stop the car, work out where I am, work out where I need to be, which isn't ideal, but I decided to keep it in there because number one, it's only a few frames, so people don't generally notice, and number two, it's, you know, I'm not hiding away from these mistakes. I did make them, therefore they deserve to be in the video. Unless it, you know, if I had taken a detour that was like 100 miles or something, I'd probably end up cutting that out. It's just me putting together these last few bits of the Lake Havasu City with the London Bridge, and I wanted to make sure that certain bits of the audio had music in. I had it's kind of weird, it was a French harmonica, not harmonica, an accordion that was playing. Someone was playing an accordion. I don't know if it was piped or if someone was actually performing it. I couldn't see, but I thought that was fun. I thought we'd have that in the video, so I wanted to make sure that any music had kind of cut out by the time that we got there. Didn't have a lot to say really. Again, I kind of wish, looking back, it's very easy 2020 hindsight and all that, but it's very easy to say, oh, I should have done this, should have done that. Didn't actually like the way that I sounded like a know-it-all in this section as well. If you've seen it, I'm basically saying, oh, I know more than you because I told you to look up the purchase of London Bridge. It wasn't my intention at the time. Just came out wrong, and I didn't do a second take of that. It is difficult with people around, like talking to the camera, so it's definitely like a confidence thing. Some people are probably just not bothered, some people can probably just go along and record whatever they want in a busy street. I'm not one of those people, so I tend to find quiet areas where whenever you see me talking to the camera, there's very few people around normally. Just don't want to intrude into anyone's day or get in the way of anything going on, which might be a slight downside. Might need to work on that for future documentaries, if I do any. If you can call this a documentary, it's a very loose term. Now I'm just going to preview the map section, set it to some music, and make sure that we've got enough music to cover that section. One thing I'm looking out for here is, given the length of the section that we've got to cover, I've got a limited selection of music, and I want to make sure that it doesn't end 30 seconds before the end of the section, and that would necessitate me putting in another 30 seconds of music, and the starting 30 seconds of any piece would then be cut off, which it's not fair to the... It doesn't really sound right if you just have the first 30 seconds of a song and then it immediately cuts out, for example. So that's what we're doing here. And in fact, the choice of music was difficult. Like, I wanted a lot of Americana and bluegrass in there, and Free Music Archive has a load of great tracks, but a lot of them aren't that style. I struggled. I struggled greatly to find music. I'm sure there's a lot more that I just couldn't find, but I really did have difficulty. So that's why you hear some tracks reused over and over. Hopefully not too often, but I needed to reuse some of them just because, in my opinion, there weren't enough. And it's very good of these people to be giving up their music and allowing other people to use it. I think that's fantastic, and the quality does vary. So any of the sort of lower quality tracks, it sounds like someone maybe had a tape recorder or something and just recorded themselves or their band playing. It wasn't the quality that I wanted in the final product here. So those have been left out. It kind of narrowed down my selection a lot. I feel like I've got a decent representation in there. I'll be looking to put forward maybe a Spotify playlist of all the tracks that we use for anyone who's interested in just hearing the soundtrack to the entire series. I doubt anyone's actually interested in that. It might be something I'd do just for fun. Anyway, I might use it myself, in fact. I quite like quite a few of these songs. I'm a sucker for bluegrass. I really am, for some reason. And then the final section is just coming out here, which is me drawing another map. It's the same map tiles. I made sure that I stitched together all the tiles I needed before I started. I'm just drawing the line once again on a different part of the map. And you might say, well, why didn't you just make the line go the whole way and then cut it where you needed it to be? And the reason for that is basically down to my ability to keep timings in my head. And cause basically, a trip from Oatman to Lake Havasu City might take up the middle part of the composition, the map composition, with the line moving along it. And if I'd done it like that, I wouldn't have been able to easily keep in my head the number of seconds it took to make that journey and match it up with other things. So the way I've done it is separate, so that each map is its distinct. You can see I've got a trip composition here. The length of that composition is the length of that particular section of video, and I'm more easily able to match up things like the numbers on the map that go along the distance signs that I've put in there, and you can see me working out more numbers here as we go along. And also it just helps keep things sort of fresh in my head. There's probably a more efficient way of doing all of this. Be interested to hear if there was, but the only way that I could find to do it that worked for me was the way that you're seeing right now. I'm messing around with all these numbers. Compositions for these are way too big, but it really doesn't matter. All we're doing is just placing the numbers in the same space as the old numbers and then wiping them out on the copy. And then just scrub through and just make sure that it all works. I haven't forgotten anything obvious here. And as you can see, the map lines, I like it. It's a cool effect, but if I'd known how long it would take me to do these, and I probably should have realised it's probably my own fault, then probably wouldn't have done those, or maybe done them in a much simpler way, like just having a line going directly instead of following the roads, just have a big line going from A to B. That would have been a lot easier to do, taking up a lot less time, and possibly enable me to get these videos out a little bit faster. There's a series of 14 videos taking the best part of a year is not really ideal to keep people interested, I have to say. Although I resigned a long time ago, not making these videos for anyone in particular. Nobody really cares. I know a few of my friends are interested in seeing them, but on the larger scale, it's not going to win any YouTube awards or draw in hundreds of thousands of viewers. So for me, the series is a nice collection of more interesting things than just photos. Because I still have the photos. 10 years from now, I'll be able to go back and look at these videos and say, I'll probably be saying, why are they in such low quality when everyone's on like 20k video by then? I don't know. I can't predict the future, but at least these will be around for the future in case I want to go back and look at them. And also the learning experience is quite valuable to me. I've learned a whole load of things, little tricks and things like, isn't it, the U key on the keyboard, just to show only the properties of a particular layer which have keyframes on them. Because when you expand out a layer, you get all of the stuff, scale, position, opacity, everything. And most of the time you don't need to interact with all those, so a nice time-saving exercise there. Putting together the last credit here for the music as well. I have forgotten one. I'll leave it to you to find which one, if you can be bothered. Go back and have a look at all those videos. I did forget one on-screen one, but none of them have been forgotten in the description, so at least they're all listed in the description. And I wasn't going to go re-render the entire video. So speaking of rendering, Adobe Media Encoder is a very strange beast. It's supposed to be able to use graphics card GPU processing, and I found it doesn't always work, so the option's not always there, Sometimes I've had to use CPU. Doesn't really make that much difference to the amount of time that's involved, I found. But it's just one of those things, really. The rendering of these videos takes up to 12 hours. So for a 20-minute video, that's obviously a long time. And it's down to the number of effects and layers and things that I've got going on. If it was just me talking at the camera, with a starting image and an ending image or something, animation, that would be fairly trivial. But these are very large video files that get produced, and high resolution as well. Good thing I didn't do 60 frames a second, otherwise we'd be looking at more like 24 hours for a render. But it's just at the level where I can sort of set it going, and then the next morning I'll have it, ready to go. Unless I made any crucial mistakes, which would trigger a re-render. And you can see I'm just putting together the ending section, and all I've done is just copied and pasted. So I'm just taking a previous video and just putting in 3 relevant images, and the next video is already done there, so just scrubbing through and making sure that they're all animated and the text is readable. The images there are darkened slightly so that we can still see them. Coming to the end of the video production finally now, but hopefully it gives you an idea of just how much stuff goes in to making every single one of these videos. And had I known that at the start, I would have probably tried to simplify it, but kind of glad I didn't really. It has taken a huge number of hours to put all these together. Like I said, I don't imagine lots of people are watching these. Maybe one day they will find them and go popular somehow, I don't know. Not really that bothered. I just wanted to make sure that I've got a decent memory of the trip, and also learn a lot of stuff about After Effects. So here I've actually made a mistake here. What I'm doing is reducing, so I've imported a few previous compositions and I'm not using all of them, so I just want to make sure that I'm only using basically everything that appears in the main composition, which is what's going to get rendered, is going to stay, but the dependencies are such that we remove everything that's not required, and then just hit that render queue. Just making sure that I haven't deleted anything from the start of the video. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed watching this little preview of me making the video, what goes into it. Yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.